So as I prepare to start identifying Genesis much better, I'm going to go through it. I'm a little intimidated by it, to be honest. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the channel. I'm finding that Genesis is framed on, it starts a monomyth sequence, a life sequence, and then a life healing sequence. Abram and Sarai is where I'm going to pick it up from. I've already covered up to after the flood pretty well, up to right after the Tower of Babel. And what I'm going to suggest is all of these play out in the psyche. But before we get going into it again, I have been playing around with the idea of what God is, how to identify God in a better way, because it seems still a little bit nebulous to me as I look at this. You know, I've been calling this just the higher self, really, which is a part of it. And that is the part of you that can, when we were born, we were attached to the higher self, except we didn't have any brain wiring. We didn't have experience. We didn't know that. We had no awareness of it. What happens? We attach to life. We live life. We go through physical experiences and we become that. At some point, we have learned to think. Now we've learned to think enough that it's like, okay, how do I get back? How do I get rid of this stuff that I'm carrying? And the higher self, if you can imagine getting into a place in your mind where you're stepping outside of yourself and going, you know what? You need to resolve that. You don't feel the emotional hurt and the turmoil at that point if you can get to that. It's, you know, if you wake up at night tossing and turning 3 or 4, that's kind of a common thing for people that when stuff is haunting you and you're laying there thinking about things, you're shifting back and forth between being haunted by this to another part of you going, hey, relax. There's nothing you can do now. Go to sleep. But you slip back and forth between there. That right there is the higher self. And what is that? Why would that be that way? That is the connection to who and what we are before life experience. However, now we can interact with it. Now we have the capacity, the brain wiring to get there and to see that. However, that's not all God is. There's an entire realm back here where things come from. And it's actually just the universe. It's not a bunch of stuff happening. But we need to point out why God is both good and bad. That is going to appear in here, and we know that in Abrahamic material, don't we? Especially when you go to the Old Testament, it's like God was horrific. Then you get to the New Testament and go, God sounds different. They restructured the way it works to update it. Yeah, we don't want God being the evil person all the time, but there's a reason why God does both good and both bad. Now, when I identify God here, God is not going to emerge as any kind of a consciousness or a being. It's not going to be supernatural. It's going to be natural, and we're going to be in charge of our life experiences. Okay, so as we get into Genesis, there's going to be a lot of interaction with God and a lot of I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you and things like this going on, and we need to understand what those are on the template when we get there. Now, I have gradually learned that actually bringing in parallel material is the best way to do this. I used to think that's not a good idea, try to stay on course, but it's actually better to kind of create these mental networks of thinking in a comfortable place, and then come and use that same process, that same thinking process somewhere where we wouldn't have thought to use it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull something from the Tao Te Ching. I'm not going to read it from this copy right here. What I'm going to do is just very quickly go through something and show in here, they're going to identify here the same thing that we're going to find out as far as what God is. So what I'm going to do is go through this process right here, and just this first page, the first verse, we're going to completely identify what this is. And in doing so, we're going to create the way our mind needs to think about this stuff in order for us to interpret it so that it plays out in the psyche so that we can use it for interactive self-healing. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do, and I'll post a link to this below. I found this online. There's a parallel translation here collection that comes from Boston University, and it's just a free PDF. So you can pull this up, download it, and you've got 4 different translations of the Tao Te Ching right there without having to go purchase anything. I want to repeat something I've said before, and that is to have multiple translations if you can, especially from I mean, if it came from English, that's fine. But if I'm reading from English and I don't know the original language and I'm relying on a translation that doesn't translate directly, the different translators are going to choose different words. They're going to do the best they can based on what they think. So when you read through one, you go, that sounds bizarre. You might read through a couple of them and go, wow, they don't even sound the same as each other. Sometimes they're close. Sometimes they supply additional information. It gives a better average idea of what's going on to have multiple translations. So it's always good to do that. When we get into the actual translation, I'm just going to use this one I've got here in my hand. It's a easy one for me to relate to. Anyway, I'm going to take that very top verse right there and talk about that one. First of all, I'm going to parallel all of these in the same way that I'm going to parallel this teaching with all the other teachings that we run into, but certainly the Bible is what we're heading for. But right now, what we want to do is identify that this is a mental process and to how we interpret it. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this and take a look at something. Okay, and here again is kind of the idea that if you get on board at some point and go, you know what, I think they all are somehow encoding the same sort of a teaching secretly in the background, we can keep bringing in parallels. What do we find in Buddha's very first twin verses? All that we are is the result of what we have thought. It is founded on our thoughts. It is made up of our thoughts. So right there, and it's going to go on a little bit more, but right there, this one is in very nearly plain language telling us that our life experience is based in mental perception. The Kybalion, step 3, mental transmutation. Mind, as well as metals and elements, may be transmuted from state to state, degree to degree, condition to condition, pole to pole, vibration to vibration. True hermetic transmutation is a mental art. Okay, so they've got a lot of new age sounding stuff in there, but what is nested in here is the idea that mental transmutation, that we've become one thing, that we want to transmute that, we want to change it. It's going to be teaching the same things in incredibly kind of this mystical, weird sort of way that's not religious, but has kind of a different take on it. It still has the material in there, but for a different kind of a mind. It's like, nah, I like doing something like this. It's kind of science and something different instead of religious. The religion hides it very, very carefully. Okay, this is the same thing, but something like this is going to tell you to transmute mentally. This one's going to tell you you're a product of your mental processes. The same sort of stuff comes through that kind of line over there, the lineage of coming down kind of more from the Egyptian and that sort of stuff. You get over into the other realm over here, and what do we have for transmutation? Forgiveness. You have to forgive the ought against your brother. The transmutation is still there, but it's held in a radically different sounding way. Render them to the same thought process, think them through. And you realize that if you're actually you're hurt, you're angry, you've got shame, you've got something like that. If you're forgiving somebody, you're changing that condition. Therefore, it is mental. But it sure doesn't sound like it, does it? These ones are very much saying it's mental. As we keep moving deeper into obscurity, we're going to find different verbiage that are going to be holding that mental concept. So if we take that and go, well, let me see if that holds up elsewhere. I'm going to read this and go, it doesn't sound the same. But what happens if I try to treat it if it is the same? What do I come up with? Let me just see what happens. It's an experiment, a thought experiment. Now, first I'll read from the copy that I have here that I always use and get that on the table. It's the one I'm going to be using. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. How weird. What is that? The Tao is the way. It's what we're looking for. It's this pathway. If you could say it is the pathway to inner healing is what the Tao is. And this is saying the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. And if you go Google that, I have or gone and looked at other YouTube videos from people that are, practicing Taoists. I don't get anybody answering that. What that means is that it's mental, but we'll get there in a second. They tell you that the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao is because it's so cryptic and obscure that you just spend a lifetime trying to explore it. If you become a Taoist, there's an entire big package of way of life to live that is what they're doing. But right here in the core material, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Let's look at the examples that they've provided and see what is different. Tao can be talked about, but not the eternal Tao. Whoa, that sounds different. Tao can be talked about, but not the eternal Tao. Huh. The way that can be spoken of is not the constant way. The way that can be spoken of. They very specifically talked about spoken. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. That's the one I got right there. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. Okay, so this one says told instead of spoken or talked about. And somehow when I read that word, it just doesn't have the same impact on me. If I read that, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, it sounds like you can't pass it along. But if I read the way that can be spoken of is not the constant way, then I get the idea that, well, okay, that's very specifically, it can't be spoken of. What other options do I have? It kind of gets my attention better. That's why averaging it out helps one come up with a better interpretation. Okay, then the fourth one again. As for the way that can be spoken of is not the constant way. Okay, when we take all of that into consideration, I think we can consider something different. There is a pathway to inner healing that can be talked about. You can talk about that all day long. But the reason it's not real is because you have to take it personally. It becomes yours. It becomes your pathway when it is eternal. And the only way that happens is you turn inward with it and it becomes mental. So by default right here, the Tao that can be told, talked about, is not the eternal one. You have to take the path, and it's a mental path. It's a mental process. There's no other way. It happens in the mind. Okay, now I'm just going to stick with this, and that's how we're going to treat the rest of the material. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. We're going to move down a little bit. Right now, we've got a void. We've got something nebulous. Nothing, we don't know what's going on. We know right now that it is a mental process. Now that we know that, the name that can be named is not the eternal name. We're starting to build a structure within that process, the mental process. We don't want to name anything, otherwise it is not eternal. Well, that's weird. We'll keep moving on and it'll build. The unnameable is the eternally real. The unnameable is the eternally real. That sounds like the last one. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. It just sounds like a big void in there. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Right here, we just came online. If we were paralleling this to Genesis, that would be when Adam begins to name the creatures on his own. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Naming in the mental world is us coming online as kids, developing enough cognition to be able to process life as good or bad and begin storing that way. We're beginning to develop our life experiences and the core structure of who and what we are through those experiences. Where did you come from? Mine was a lot of abuse and a lot of things that were, there was a lot of hurtful things. So I have a direct understanding of this material. Naming is the origin of all particular things. I hate that. I don't like that. I'm a piece of crap. Yeah, I'm stupid. I will never amount to anything. My brother committed suicide. I found him in the woods. All of these things are being put away and stored away, and it's not okay. And I'm becoming that. Naming is the origin of all particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. This is not physical desire. It is, and these are become analogous terms. Desire does not mean I physically want something. I desire food. I desire a new yacht. I desire whatever. That is not what this is about. Desire means I'm holding on to something in life. Those experiences, the stuff that I have named, I am now holding on to that. That is called a desire. It is not a desire, is it? I don't physically want it, yet I'm holding on to it, not knowing. I'm holding it inside of me. So they're calling it desire. I'm not dealing with it. Well, in this case, free from all of that, free from desire, you realize the mystery of life, the flow of things. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Now what we have is a verse duality going on that I recognize here now that I see it. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. This is going to be where the cyclical things are coming around to hurt us. Caught in the things that we are, the things that we're holding on to. It's a desire. It might be, I hate that. It's called a desire because I'm not dealing with it and I'm just hating it. I'm going to keep hating it. I must desire it, huh? I freaking hate it. I'm ashamed of it. Caught in that, you see only the manifestations. There's a repetitive cycle of it that we need to understand. So free from that desire, we have a great life. Caught in that, we have problems. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. Here's where we get into God. Yet mystery and manifestations, the free or the things you're hooked into, arise from the same source. The good, the bad, everything in your life that you experience comes from the same source. This source is called darkness. darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. Gateway to all understanding. Jesus in the narrow gate, many stand outside where only a few will enter in. That's the same anywhere you go. There's a point where it's important for us to understand the limitations of our own higher self and then what is beyond that. And we can think through that. You just go to your higher self, step outside of yourself, look at planet Earth from a distance, look at yourself where you're no longer, get to that, however it works for you, get to a point where you're like, okay, in this mindset right here, all that stuff I'm holding, all that bundle of stuff, I've got it. I'm not looking at it right now. I'm not feeling it. I'm not experiencing it. I've got something else going on. You have to get to that higher self right there where you are not feeling the emotional attachment to your hurt, to your experiences. That is the higher self when you get there. Now, beyond that is the entire cosmos and everything else, and we can't get bigger than what we are. There are people that say you can, and I say I don't believe so at all. And I will tell you why. I've had people say, you can get bigger than that and go to the whole universe. I'm like, I don't think that that's possible. I think that the universe is something beyond us, that in a mental concept, we can get to a point where we are not attached. We can get kind of local, but I can't get to a point where I am remembering everything that my life experiences are and everybody else's and all that. I'm not all that encompassing. I think that probably when people get like that, they're probably more into ego than they are into self. At any rate, that is what is happening when we're living life. We're having physical experiences, and whatever is good and whatever is bad has to come from someplace. It's a cause and effect universe, which means nothing can happen in a vacuum. Whatever happens, happens because there's an energy behind it. So if something bad happens, that's being supplied by the universe. If something good happens, the energy for that is being supplied by the universe. The mind and the experience and the way you decide that experience is positive, negative at a point in time is how we begin building our life experiences, our split self, our free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only the manifestations. Are we free from life and floating free in the Tao? Or are we caught in those things that we're hanging on to and continually seeing the manifestations of them? But darkness within darkness, the gateway to all understanding. Yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. Okay, if all of that sounds good, let's just move ahead into Genesis right here. Genesis 12:3 has this line that says, I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. The Tao Te Ching parallel would be, yet mystery and manifestations arise from the same source. That means the things that you're hanging on to, or the freedom, the good, the bad, the blessing, the cursing, the curses. That is what is happening. If you look at this closely and then step back from it, what you see is something else. Jesus, judge not lest you be judged, for the measure which you mete unto others will be likewise meted unto you. Buddha's karma. All of these are cause and effect. They're based in cause and effect. And it doesn't matter what the life experience is, it's going to continue. The blessings come from where? They're coming from someplace. You can ask God for help, but what happens? Life continues until you understand that what God is, and it's coming through a mind that is still trapped in the pain of early life, and things are experiencing out. The stuff that we continue to re-experience are what emerges. So as I get into Genesis then and begin to interpret it, that is actually what we're going to be, this right here is the basis, the foundational idea of how we're going to be looking at God. I don't know that they're always using it consistently. I think there's a point where I am God is the higher self, but my higher self is not the one that decides good or bad. The energy comes from someplace else. It's the conscious life experience and the way that the consciousness decides how the quality of that memory is, the shame, the pain, the emotional state of it. It gets stored that way, and that is what becomes a part of us, and it continues to accumulate that way in life. And that what happened to us was, we just arrive where we arrive. Whatever happens, happens. We become products of that environment. But that as life continues on, we continue to kind of flow in line with those early life experiences. And things continue to repeat, and we'd like to extract ourselves from them. And by understanding, that's what's happening. So in the beginning, right here in the beginning, Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. This is going to be the starting of a monomyth in Genesis. They're talking about Abram and Sarai right here, and this is right before they get headed off. So this in the beginning of the monomyth is setting up the conditions. It's saying, I will bless you. This is setting up that this story or that life works based on cause and effect. Okay. All right. So Genesis, that's it. Manage it this way. We'll just look at it as we move along and see that, when you're engaging with God to make changes, that is really using the higher awareness in conjunction with the consciousness that is where all the fear is felt. The consciousness doesn't want to experience those memories. So that's why they're trapped. The higher self is the one that is going to be working with the consciousness to go ahead and allow those to emerge so that a healing can be effected. Without that, it can't happen. So that is what is happening. But the good or the bad happening, that's just a matter of, you got bad stuff inside of you. Guess what? Bad stuff is going to keep happening, and that's coming from God. But where's it coming from really? It's a continual cyclical pain of something that is happening right there. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you, I will curse. When? It doesn't specify. We can imply cycles. So this is cause and effect and cycles in one verse. How clever is that? When you look at it, it encompasses a lot. Anyway, okay. Hope this was interesting. See you in Genesis.